Welcome to the Wandering Road, a place where the unseen moves all around us. The stories you'll hear aren't just whispered legends. They're shadows that cling, footsteps that follow, and whispers that never fade. Every turn pulls you closer to the unknown, and once you've heard what waits here, the night will never feel the same again.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the Wandering Road podcast. I'm your co-host, Dean, not Chris, the creator of the show. And we're lucky enough to have another awesome guest on the show. His name is Charlie Rivero, and he is actually a paranormal investigator and a filmmaker. And he has some really cool content out there, and we're super excited to hear all of his stories and the things he's experienced and captured. How you doing, Charlie? It's good to have you on.
Good. Thank you, guys. I appreciate you guys having me.
But like I said, you're a filmmaker and a paranormal investigator. You have several platforms that you're on. My favorite so far is YouTube because you have an absolutely killer intro. But yeah, so can you just really quickly tell us how you came up with the idea of what you're covering, like how it started for you?
Sure. Aside from having my own personal experiences, but I started back in 1987. And my mentor, Doug Drensky III, back then he was 85 years old. And now Doug was actually really close with Ed and Lorraine Warren. So when Doug, I was introduced to Doug by a friend of mine who actually was one of the managers and ran one of the casinos out here in Vegas. One of the biggest interests was when I found out that you can actually help the deceased. So aside from doing a paranormal investigation and helping those who are curious or trying to find out what's going on at their location, finding out, okay, there is a way to help the deceased. I'm like, wow, this is awesome. And then I started kind of really getting into my head and thinking about all the different experiences I've personally had and things like that, growing up as a kid, and some of the weird dreams I had that just were very eye-opening and shocking. But Doug, God bless him, may he rest in peace. But he sat there and said, look, don't F with me. I take this real serious. And I respected that. The guy was super old and super knowledgeable. And there were things that we loved about the Warrens and things that were kind of iffy about the Warrens. It's just the way it is. Things were handed down, they were passed down to him from them, and then he passed down stuff to me from them, and so on and so forth. But that was one of the biggest things for me, is knowing that I can help the deceased, aside from the living.
So when you say help the deceased, you mind going into that a little bit?
Yeah, of course. So I'm sure you guys have heard in general people saying, oh, we need help. We need to help them crossing over, that kind of stuff, which is great. That's totally great. But there are situations where I've had people contact me and say, hey, Charlie, look at, there's stuff going on at the house. I don't feel uncomfortable. I just want to know what's going on, but I don't want to get rid of it. So usually, depending on the situation, but being able to help the deceased, sometimes it can take one investigation or sometimes it can take 3 or 4. It just depends. It doesn't happen on call. I've had investigations where I've had absolutely nothing happen. In cases like this, it's really important to figure out what has manifested, if anything, why it's there, and then trying to see, number one, if it belongs there or if it's a loved one, and creating that comfort zone so there is no misinterpretation or misunderstanding. And then just giving the person, whoever asking to do the investigation, like, hey, this is what's going on, and let them decide what they want to do. But I will usually give them recommendations based on what can occur, what cannot happen, things like that. Because you always get those people that want to kind of dab into it improperly, and then they create a mess. And that's where it becomes a little tricky.
In those instances where someone asks you to investigate and like you come in and you set up and do whatever you need to do, have there ever been instances where you were like, you know what, I'm sorry guys, like I have to go. That I cannot handle like what's in here. There's something in here that is like dark or very unsettling. Have you ever had those instances?
So since I started till now, I've only had 3 situations that were extremely negative and demonic. When it comes to anything demonic, it's not something that occurs all the time like people think it does. A person doesn't get possessed all the time like people think. As a matter of fact, there's a really big TV show, I'll just put it that way, that's been out for quite some time. And I've known them personally. As a matter of fact, I got to know one of them before he was a paranormal investigator. He used to be a DJ. So I've known them personally for a long time. And, they used to ask me, even, I think the last time I heard from them was probably about maybe 4 years ago. Because I used to hear from the writers, I used to hear from them, and hey, would you be willing to make up stories for some of the episodes? No, absolutely not. That's not going to happen. Yeah, I take it very seriously. Now, there was an instance where I had a gentleman reach out to me when we're talking about the negative. Now that person, I touch a sandwich, I'm possessed. I touch a light bulb, I'm possessed. I touch a car key, I'm possessed. Get out of here with that. It's all about the TV ratings and stuff like that. But you're kind of really destroying the paranormal community, and you're disrespecting the deceased in every avenue. Now, back in I think it was 1990, this gentleman got my information, and I'm sure it was through my mentor. And this guy was a contractor. He called me. I remember picking up my phone just as my answering machine back then was about picking up the call, and I picked it up. And he says, "Are you the effing ghost guy?" And I said, "Yes, yeah, that would be me." He goes, "Can we meet up somewhere?" And we met up somewhere. I met up at his office. I said, "Hey, can we meet up at your house?" And he's like, "I refuse to step foot there. I'm never going back there again until this crap is out of there." And he was like adamant. He was adamant. And, the guy was saying, oh, there's poltergeists, there's demons, and there's that. Usually when somebody's really afraid or somebody's experiencing something they've never experienced before, they start throwing out all these things like it's a demon or it's this or that, But okay, I said, yeah, no problem. So I met up at his office, he had a construction company. And so he gave me the key to the house and we set up a time, but he said, I'm never stepping foot there ever again until it's out of there. It's been too much. I can't handle it. And I'm like, wow, okay, no big deal. Well, I'll get this taken care of. I get there. It was on a Friday night. It was about 1:00 in the morning. Now the house, it was up Sunrise Mountain here in Las Vegas on the east side of town. And I get there. The house is empty. I get there. The first thing I do is I go to the main power box and I shut it all off because I don't want nothing coming on, no fans, no AC, no nothing. I want nothing coming on while I'm doing my investigation. So I'm sitting there. And as you walk in the front door, just to the right was a fireplace. And it was a brick fireplace. I was sitting there and you can look straight up to the landing of the stairs. I was like, okay, cool. So I'm just sitting there and I'm trying to figure out what my game plan is. I'm hearing people like walk around upstairs and I'm thinking, okay, that's a little bit odd. And I wonder if, well, no, he didn't say, I'm thinking to myself, no, he didn't say anybody was going to be here. But then it stopped. No big deal. Now, as I'm setting up, I had a high-8 camera that shot in infrared, and I set that on the tripod, and I sat it kind of low and wide. And I did that because I'm infamous for knocking stuff over. So I figured, let me put it wide. That way it doesn't tip over, and it's pretty low to the ground, and I have it facing up. As I'm doing that, I'm starting to hear more movement, and I look up, and you can kind of see in the hallway. Now, in that hallway, there was, again, the place was empty. The windows were pretty much, light was coming through from the street light and stuff. And I can see a little bit of movement, but it was no big deal. So what I did, went ahead, walked up the stairs. I sat at the landing of the stairs at the top with my back to the hallway. And I said, hello, I'm here. I'm here to help you. I'd like to communicate with you. I'm not here trying to interrupt anything. I'm not here to bother you. And I'm not here to disrespect you. I would love to communicate with you and see if I can help you. All of a sudden, I see the light in the backyard turn off. Now, mind you, the main power has been shut off. So I look down there and I'm seeing this. I'm like, okay, walk back down, go to the main power source and it's still off. I go to the light switch of the backyard, turn it on, turn it off, and it shuts off. I tried turning it back on, wouldn't turn off. Then I start hearing a grunt. That's where I was concerned. I heard a grunt, and usually something like that is something that's been active for a while, something really negative, but something that's been brought there. I'm hearing this grunt. It was very active. And I'm like, okay, so I go back up there and I sit back down and I'm hearing this and I can feel it. I can feel it like behind me. Now, one of the bedrooms that I saw an apparition, very short apparition, and it was not of human form. That's when I knew we had a problem. And I saw it going into that room. So put everything down for a minute, locked the front door, and I drove to the gas station, get on the payphone, and I call this guy and I said, hey, listen, I'm just curious, would you mind if I tear up the carpet in one of the rooms for a certain reason? And he says, I don't care what you do. I don't care what you do. Go ahead, go into the garage. I may have some stuff in there. Do what you need to do. Cool. I go back to the house, go to the garage, and I find a utility knife, and I start cutting the carpet in sections. I start rolling it up. And what do I see on the floor? Is a painted pentagram with candles and stuff melted all over the floor. So somebody had some kind of a ritual there before this guy. I don't know if it was maybe the resident before or how many residents before. I'm not sure. but you can tell somebody had some kind of a ritual because there was like melted candles and wax everywhere. There was like signs and symbols and all this stuff. All of a sudden, and I have it all on video. I have it all my footage. I have it. I have to digitize it because it's all on microcassettes or high 8 tapes. So all of a sudden, as I'm doing this and I'm saying a prayer, and I'm doing a separate cleansing in that particular room. And as I'm doing that, I can. It sounded like somebody picked up the house and dropped it. That's what it felt like. And you can hear it. I go downstairs and the camera that I had on the tripod was actually tipped over. So I played back the footage as I'm sitting there. I played back the footage and I'm watching it on the monitor and I'm watching it. And you can see where the camera got picked up and pushed over. It's not like it just tumbled over. It got picked up and then knocked over. Super long story short, I knew we had a problem. And so I'm not of a particular religion. I'm not against religion. I'm more of a spiritual person. But to be a paranormal investigator, it's important to have an understanding of each religion so you can properly and respectfully do an investigation for whoever it is. Again, this guy didn't care. He refused to go back into that place, period. I got out of the home. I mean, I did what I had to do. I got my footage. I got all my stuff. The next day, I met up with a priest that I knew. And he did what's considered an emergency request to do a proper cleansing of the home. So he went in the early morning of one day. The second day was during the afternoon. Third day during the evening. And then the fourth day, super late at night. I kid you not, you can walk in that place, and I'm already getting goosebumps. You can feel the difference in that place. Like just all the negativity was gone. I was finally able to get a hold of Dave, and he came back and checked out the house, and he was really happy about it and this and that. I ended up running into one of the old neighbors that lived next door to that house. They said that they moved because every single night they would hear screaming and crying out of that house when nobody was there. They said the one time that they were in the backyard and they had family over, the feeling was so awful that was it for them. We're done. We're out. So they ended up selling their home and leaving. So their house wasn't even affected by it. They were just that terrified of the house being next door to it. And so I found that very interesting because obviously whoever, like I said, I don't know if it was the person that lived there before this guy bought the house or what, but obviously they were doing rituals or were doing all kinds of stuff, and they unlocked doors that shouldn't have been unlocked. And that's one of the biggest problems I have with people now, even some investigators, because they think that you can just go in there and use a Ouija board, and then you're all of a sudden you're pretty much in deep crap.
That's like Chris's staple since we started the show. We talked to people like doing tarot cards. We talked to plenty of people who do professional, they actually know what they're doing sort of thing.
Yeah.
But all too many times we talk to people, or not talk directly, but we hear about people who misuse tarot cards or think they can just, bust them out whenever, or same with the Ouija board. They try to like conjure something. And so I'm glad you said that, because it's definitely in the theme of the things we've seen, people we've talked to.
People ask me, is the Ouija board really a bad thing to use? And I said, no. You have to know how to use it, when to use it, and why you're using it. The person's intention is going to say a lot. A Ouija board is like, look, if you want me to hang a picture up on your wall, if I get a nail and a hammer on your drywall, it's going to work just fine. But if I get that hammer and nail on a window, you're going to have a problem, So it's a great tool. You just can't use it all the time. It just depends when you're using it, why you're using it. But I've seen people, like if you go on YouTube and type in people using Ouija boards, 99% of the time you're going to see people going, okay, so let's see what happens. No, let's not. Okay?
Yeah,
That's not how it works.
Oh no, I agree. I agree, Charlie. What's crazy? I wish I knew of you when I lived in a haunted house. It sucked.
Really?
It sucked. They're like, just to quickly give you a quick gist.
Sure.
We would hear footsteps in the attic, like strong, like footsteps, boots. It wasn't just localized to the attic. It would go up and down the stairs. It would, at night, you would hear it like, you could lay in bed and you'd hear the footsteps go from like the front of the house, living room, dining room, kitchen, like back and forth, back and forth. It would like mimic voices of my parents and like call my name out. Dude, it hated when people did like religious prayers. Sorry to go off on like a little tangent there. I just felt like sharing that because it was I felt like it was relevant to like.
So I'm curious, if you don't mind me asking now, like when you would hear the footsteps and all these other things, so this happened nightly?
Literally like every day.
So it was residual. So yeah, that's definitely a haunting for sure.
It was every
And
day.
what happens with things like that, in cases like that, when somebody does try to do a cleansing, a lot of times if they're doing it properly, and it sounds like your family was doing it correctly, because what happens in a case like that is when you do a cleansing, you have now left that area vulnerable for something else to manifest. That's why it's usually, when doing a cleansing, it's important that after you do the cleansing, you fill that room up with positive energy, and you usually do that with like Palo Santo. That way, nothing can manifest and take up that space. So I think that was maybe a part that was missing, aside from the proper cleansing, because now you have this thing that's now manifesting, creating its own presence, and that can sometimes get really harsh. That can get really harsh. I think if somebody has a religion that they believe in, I think it's important that they stick with that, and just follow their heart. You know what I mean?
Yeah, definitely. That's what I always say, like, when it comes to the paranormal. If we gather, like, legit evidence and, there's something negative or there's something on the other side, that means what people believe in, there has to be a possibility that it exists.
Sure.
That there's gotta be a balance somewhere.
Hmm. Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the biggest things is being able to have an open mind to hear other people out, and have an understanding of what's been going on. I've done over 1,000 private residences across the United States in my time, and that's not including, like, the Waverly Hills Sanatorium in Louisville, Kentucky, or the Amityville house back in 1989, and things like that. Right? Being able to actually sit down for a second and say, okay, I'm genuinely feeling something. I'm genuinely going through this experience. I think it's important that I try to understand it. And that's what I did. And the bizarre thing is, I had different people at different times, they don't know each other, that would ask me, hey, I have a loved one that's kind of in the process of crossing over, or, they're in their last stages. And I can tell just by looking at their fingertips, you can tell when they're pretty much on their way out. They would want me to document their last moments. And again, none of these people knew each other. And every single one of them explained and described the exact same thing as they were passing on. It was quite interesting to hear them say, name off these people that have already been gone for quite some time, and seeing other people that were trying to guide them through and things like that, and seeing this beautiful area and just all these things that people described all at the same time, all at the same way, I should say, not at the same time, but all in the same form at different times, And again, these were all different people. Nobody knew each other, but yet they were explaining the same type of experience, which I found it fascinating.
It's crazy you bring that up, because from time to time, we've maybe talked to a few people who talked about similar things like crossing over, but I'll never forget years and years and years ago when my grandfather passed away. And I wasn't there for it. I was away at school. I couldn't make it home. But according to my family, when they were in the hospital room for his last moments, and he had a really long life. He had a really good long life, but he was a little bit not too ultra lucid at the end, but he was still there. Like he didn't have dementia, but he was reporting around the time that before he passed away, that he was seeing his father. So my great grandfather and my great uncle, his brother, or I think it was his brother-in-law, in the room with him in his final moments. And it sounded like a very beautiful, positive experience. It wasn't, anything negative, but that always stuck with me, because I was really young when I heard that. So it's kind of comforting to hear when I hear stories like you bring up, that you've been there many times and it's consistently similar. I kind of feel like that gives a little bit of credibility to people like you in terms of, or a lot of credibility in terms of like what actually happens, or what you have discerned happens in the end.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's a good time to pivot back to, I want to revisit the story, about the demonic instance in the house. And I want to ask you, did you ever bother doing any follow-up research, or were you interested in doing follow-up research into what that was? Because my interest was piqued when you mentioned that the entity you saw was not a human form. And not only that, it was a shorter being. So I don't think we've ever heard about a demonic being that's shorter, because usually when people talk about monstrous things they see, they're huge, hulking, crouching under the doorway to get in. I don't think we've ever heard of a small one. So like, did you ever bother to look into seeing what that could have been, what kind of demonic spirit it was? Do you have any idea whatsoever what was going on after or before it was cleansed?
So, doing some research on that whole thing, because I went to the assessor's office and got all the information for the property. and the land parcel and things like that, to see what was there prior to the home, because it was an older home. It was an older ranch home, you know. And so that place has been there forever. It was just basically just desert. It was basically just, you know, hills and roads, or land and stuff like that. Nothing too crazy, no burial spots, anything like that. Now, as far as the apparition and seeing something, it definitely was demonic for sure. And just the way it was presented, the way it presented itself, and it being short, it being considered of what's considered the existence of a fallen angel and its growth. That growth was manifested by somebody who was trying to summon some kind of demon purposely for that reason, not trying to just get in touch with the other side, but somebody was actually trying to summon demons. And so the opportunities of anything trying to manifest at that moment, having its first opportunity, was like a fallen angel or something demonic that's going to be able to go in there. And if somebody, whoever was that was in there, would have allowed that to use their body or their energy or anything like that to come forward and start using them as a portal or some type of a tool to be able to, kind of like we are now, where there's like our bodies are, and the way I see our bodies, it's like we're a tool, we're a vessel to be able to touch, taste, hear, smell, things like that, right? But the sole existence of a demon or anything demonic and trying to come forward in a way without permission becomes more difficult versus somebody who has summoned it and now has made it vacant for it to appear and wander. The thing is, I know that this person did something that they bit off more than they can chew. And they were just like, okay, it's probably no big deal. I'm out of here. It's no big deal. Nothing's going to happen. But little do they know that they went in depth with, you know, creating the whole design, the pentagram, the candles, all it was a full on ritual. And so knowing that it was something demonic and knowing just by the way the priest reacted, some of the things he was naming off. And I tell this to everybody because I've talked to people where they've said, oh my God, Charlie, you know, I've had this dream and it was about a demon, and I'll stop them right there. And I'll stop them right there. And I'll say, look, do not say the name of the demon. If that's what happened, you're not supposed to do that. Depending on your religion, but 90% of the religions will sit there and say, look, we'll get it out of you. We have to talk to you. That's what you want to do, is talk to your higher up and whoever it is that you believe in, and talk with them. Like the Catholics, 100%. If you're Catholic, like, you do not want to say the name of the demon. That's where you go talk to the priest and you let them know that you're dealing with something that's supernatural and that's not human and it's bothering you, and they will get the name. They will get the name out of it. And that's how it's cleansed out of your body into their power, so it can be properly removed from its existence. So it can be really tricky. It can definitely be really tricky.
I have to take this opportunity to combine that with the fact that you are more spiritual and less religious with this general question I've always had for anybody when the topic comes up. And I want to get your perspective on it because I think you're going to have a really great answer.
Sure.
You said in the beginning that you want to be very knowledgeable about other religions. And you want to understand their inner workings, their history, their texts, and et cetera, before you approach the situation. And you also mentioned that in that particular home where you saw the demonic entity, there was a pentagram. Now, I'm sure, as you know, pentagrams weren't always the mark of the devil. You know, it kind of evolved over the years. It was a pagan symbol. It wasn't necessarily evil until it was acquired by and perceived and taken that way by some people.
Sure.
Combining that back with the concept of the Ouija board. You know, the Ouija board is just a game in and of itself. It's a physical object that was created by a company. So my question to you is, does the actual physical thing itself, whether it be like the Ouija board or the pentagram or whatever other symbol that might be good or evil, does that matter at all whatsoever? Or is it purely what the person doing it, you know, giving it power? So like, it wasn't the pentagram, the fact that there's a pentagram on the floor, it was the fact that the person was trying to pursue something negative and evil. And then if I can take that a step further, I would say, well, if there is no one true religion that is reflecting the ultimate reality of, say, like demons or something, like let's just say Catholicism, for example, there's a subset of demons. Is that reality real in pockets? Is it like a tulpa sort of thing where humans manifest it to make it real and it actually exists? Or what is really going on the other side in terms of, like, say, I don't know, as just an example, like demonology for something like Hinduism, Islam, Judaism, you know, Christianity, whatever, because obviously they don't always blend together.
Right.
So what do you think is really going on, and does it really matter what the physical objects in this world hold in terms of power, or is it just what we uh, base it off of, given our religions or our proclivities or whatever we're interested in?
I think one of the biggest things that people need to understand, the physical object itself is something that they're using to pour their energy into. Because I promise you, like from Toys R Us, Ouija board from Mattel, I really doubt Mattel has their intentions on wanting to, to harm anybody. You know what I'm saying? I
Yeah,
think the thing
yeah.
is creating a game board that they know a bunch of kids are going to buy and all this other stuff, right? The only time an object is going to matter is if you go onto a sacred land. Okay, we're talking more about tribes and things like that. And let's just say you actually came across a real Dybbuk box, a real one, which good luck. But let's just say you did. It's not something you can just pick up. It's not something that's just going to be given to you. Okay. If you were granted that, which good luck, I wouldn't recommend that for anybody, especially it holding all the negativity and all the harbored this and that. If that was given to you, it has to be done through a ritual, through the tribe where it's blessed and given to you out of that purpose, right? So when it comes to like the pentagram underneath the carpet, do I think that alone created a problem? No. Do I think the person drawing that for the intention of wanting to do something because they had a visual, they had a journey, they had a specific reason to do that because they know if they did A, B, and C to that pentagram, that energy was going to pretty much submit an open call and an open door for something to manifest. That intention created that design they put down there to sit there and allow them to manifest what they wanted. Same with the Ouija board. That's like me saying, okay, well, I'm going to go buy a Bentley. Okay. But if I sat there and I tried really, really hard, okay, and I say it's not a Bentley, it's a Maybach, it's still going to be a Bentley. It's not going to change whatsoever. But if I want to drive it like a Maybach, sure. If I want to drive it like a Formula One car, sure. Doesn't mean it is one. It's the same. It's the kind of same purpose, right? So the object itself, unless it is something off of a tribe, or unless it is something that's been like the Annabelle doll, for instance, the real Annabelle doll, people, screwed around too much and found out. People think, oh no, it's just coincidence. I don't believe in coincidences, but like, the faith of energy is really powerful when you sit there because, okay, let me see what happens. You're now intentionally trying to see if something will occur if I do A, B, and C. Okay, if I light the candle and I cut the wick during a storm, is this going to happen? I don't know. Let's see. Well, no, let's not. Let's not do that because you're now creating the intention to create a bad atmosphere around. Our planet is constant energy. And if you think about it, just in the city of Las Vegas alone, you have over 30 different cemeteries, right? 30 graveyards, whatever. The deceased outnumber the living anywhere between 35 to 55 to 1. So that's a lot of energy, right? And people say, yeah, that's crazy because you don't see new cemeteries being built. Well, no, I get what you're saying, but people also get cremated. 90% of the time, the cremations get taken home, so it's not taking up space at the mausoleum or at the graveyard at the cemetery, things like that. But all that energy. So if you sit there and try to summon something, and you try to throw that positive energy in your mind and say, okay, I'm going to throw this energy and create this positive atmosphere where something can manifest, it's going to happen. It's going to happen. Static electricity, things, all these types of energies that create a reaction. You get a balloon, you rub it on your head, what happens? Your hair stands up. You know what I'm saying? These little things, I know they sound crazy, but these are all positive results. These positive results can lead to something negative. It doesn't matter if you have something physical or not, but that person's intention can definitely cause an issue, 100%. And that artifact, that materialistic item, is only something that they're adding to it to make their belief even stronger because like, oh my gosh, yeah, that's this. Now this board is going to help me do this even more. So now they're throwing that even out there even harder, And so it's important for people to understand that, 'Cause I've had people go to a Jewish cemetery and they almost shit themselves, pardon my language. And I heard the audio. And I was like, what did you guys do a prayer before you did the investigation or anything like that? I don't do investigations in cemeteries. I'll do evaluations, but I won't do an investigation. They said, no, we didn't do anything like that, which is mistake number one. But every time I heard the playback and you can hear like this moaning and almost like a crying, and I said, that's nothing to really be afraid about. I said, you got to understand something. The Jewish, when they were buried, if you go to their headstones, you will see rocks or coins on their headstone. And that's because that religion was big believers in, once you passed, they wanted to make sure that your soul was kept down from being bothered or disrupted. So they would put the stones or coins out of respect for the weight to keep their souls down from going elsewhere. So the moaning that you're hearing is the distress of an energy that you're trying to bring up that should be at rest. You know what I'm saying? And I know, to me, it makes a lot of sense. To others, I sound crazy, but it's something that I've looked into, I've studied, and I've seen and experienced for so many years. And it's very powerful. Very, very powerful.
So, Charlie, you said something that kind of grabbed my attention. It's the Annabelle doll. So we know I think, was it last year or was it the year before, they were taking it around for a tour for the Conjuring movie. Dean and I know some people that think the Annabelle doll story and the doll itself is kind of full of shit. I've heard people say, like, yeah, I'm willing to go and toss that damn thing around, yada yada yada. What are your? I personally want to do that because I don't want to try. But what are your thoughts on like some of the stories, like the Annabelle haunting and the item itself? And you said your mentor like personally knew the Warrens, so if you don't mind talking about your thoughts on them and some of their cases as well.
Again, the Warrens, I think there was a lot that they did that I was like, okay, awesome. And I can honestly say there was a lot that I disagreed with. One of them being the Amityville house. When it comes to the Annabelle doll, the research that I've done, and even the nurse that originally had it as a gift, and reading like the actual claims of what she experienced, there were things in there, including the type of manifestation that would occur outside of the doll, without the doll being included, but like the manifestations that would happen and that would occur while she was at home is very real. It's not something somebody could just come up and make up out of the blue, sitting there and all of a sudden she's getting sick and feeling terrible. It's not because I can take a hygrometer to a room and see if there's enough humidity to build up mold to make you sick. But in that case where she was at, that wasn't going on. So just automatically getting that ill, getting those feelings and having an instantaneous result, not a time-lapse result or not a time, something that was, it was taking time for it to happen. Things were instantaneously going on with her. And then it started bleeding into the doll. These concerns were going into the doll. And like all of a sudden she was putting all this stuff into that doll. She started getting this belief of the doll. Now, do I think the Annabelle doll is cursed? I think there's a lot going on with that doll. I wouldn't sit there and say, hey, I'm going to go ahead and pick it up and start, screwing around with it, see what happens. That's a disrespect for the ones that have passed away because of what's been going on with it or what they think has happened with it. But I do 100,000% believe that there is a negative frequency and a negative surrounding that has been created around that doll. 100%. Whether it's been a curse. Now, do I know if that doll's been cursed? I don't know. Is it possible? 100%. We don't know where that doll originally came from, other than when the person bought it and exchanged hands, gave it to the nurse as a gift. We don't know before that. Anything could have happened. If what has happened so far has occurred, imagine that before that, a lot more could have happened that we don't even know about, that nobody even knows about. So I think that there's a lot that doll carries in regards to weight of negativity. Would I sit there and recommend somebody, hey, why don't you go check it out and, pick it up and tickle its belly button? I wouldn't recommend that. I wouldn't, because now you're throwing that energy out there to test fate. You're throwing that out there to create that atmosphere of something bad happening. Does that make sense? And I would never, ever recommend somebody to do that. Just the different stories that I've read and all the strange things that have occurred because of it is heartbreaking. Even the people that had died in the motorcycle accident after the whole Annabelle thing way back when. It's not just coincidence, but there's a lot that comes to that vibe and that energy you're throwing out there. And you're kind of testing the fires. That's the way I look at it. You are definitely testing the fire.
No, I definitely agree. It's what they say, F around and find out type of thing. So like,
exactly.
Like if you touch fire, there's a possibility you're going to get burned. You mentioned Amityville. What were your thoughts on that investigation? And what didn't you like that they did
So,
there?
Amityville was my first solo investigation back in 1989. I was actually invited to stay there, and I was there by myself for 3 nights. When it comes to a place that has multi-levels, you always start at the top and work your way down. And the reason for that is if let's just say you start at the bottom level, you're on the first floor. Let's just say something occurs and it frightens you, and you don't think, your reaction, you try to run. Sometimes you'll run up the stairs. You've now put yourself in a situation where you have no way out, or you make it very difficult to leave. So you always start at the top and work your way down, because if something happens, you can at least, you see the stairs, you're going to run. And you're going to go out one way or another because you're going down. That's the only way out. But with Amityville, I took a look at all the crime scene photos. That was the first thing I looked at before doing the investigation. Took a really close look at all the photographs. I actually have the original 911 transcript from that night. Went through the whole transcript. I went as far as trying to get a hold of, before he passed away, Ronnie DeFeo Jr., to see if they would allow me to interview him and talk with him and stuff like that. But unfortunately, that never went through. Then, of course, he passed on. But the Amityville, I have a Polaroid. I will always use a Polaroid for many reasons, because the images cannot be altered. I had a few anomalies pop up in Polaroid. There was some slight poltergeist activity. When people hear poltergeist, they think, oh my God, this is great. Poltergeist is a German word for noisy ghost. Okay, so basically things that move around. Sometimes it could be more extreme than others, but yes, that's pretty much the meaning of that. Now, did I hear things moving around? Sure. Now, did I experience anything severe or in the basement, anything like that? No. People asked me, was it weird? Well, sure, because I knew what happened there. But looking at the photographs, looking at the deceased, the entire family, seeing where they were laying and how the blood pattern was laying, there was no movement of the bodies whatsoever, because there was no trace of the blood being manipulated by the body, because the body was moved or shifted or anything like that. The body was all right there. The blood was all boom right there. One of the biggest things for me, when Doug, my mentor, had asked me my thoughts on that investigation, I said, look, I get it. Anything could be possible as far as, hauntings or manifestation. Is the place, for me, was it haunted? No. Is it an active place? Sure. There was some activity. Big difference, though. Like what you were explaining about your house, that's a haunting. You had a lot of residual things going on there. But with Amityville, for me personally, nothing happened for me to sit there and say, okay, this is haunted. Now, the biggest thing for me was the synopsis of the entire investigation is the bodies were not moved. So because of the blood, there was no streaks of blood like somebody tried to move or anything like that. So I'm thinking it's so bizarre that not once, twice, or 3 times the shots were fired, but several times, but let alone after the first one, not one person got up, not one person woke up. So when I asked for the toxicology report, there was nothing found in their system. Nobody had anything in their system. I know that Ronnie DeFeo Sr., the dad, was involved with the mob and stuff like that. Could it have been where you had 3 or 4 mobsters in there that shot at the same time, just a couple of times and done, so nobody would wake up? Of course that's possible. Do I believe that's what happened? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. There's no way. But just the fact that all these gunfires went off and not one person woke up, not even a jolt to where the movement of blood would be known. No. They were all face down, which was execution style, which was really weird, really bizarre, number one. But number two, that nobody woke up. There was a former homicide investigator that I got together with, and he fired the same gun. We did a test out in the field, and there were some old barns and buildings and stuff like that. And he went on the other side of some of these buildings, quite far away, and you could hear it clear as day, obviously, right? So you can hear it from 6 blocks away. Can you imagine inside the house? It would be extremely loud. So that's one of the things that grabbed my attention, was that there was no movement of the bodies of the individuals. Nobody got up. Nobody did anything. And then the toxicology report showed that there was nothing in their system. That, to me, says that there was something other than criminal, I should say, from Ronnie DeFeo's side. But he had mentioned over and over again that, he was hearing voices. And then he said that he did do it. Then he said that his sister helped him, or was told he was supposed to do it by his sister, although she was one of them that was dead. But the thing is, the way the bodies were and the way the blood was sitting and the way the bullets and stuff were entered through the body, that's the person would have gotten up. Somebody would have gotten up. So there was something somehow that created them to just not wake up. And I think Ronnie DeFeo, when he had accidentally had mentioned that in the report that I read, the police report, that he wasn't afraid of the entity and that he was willing to do whatever it took. And that was in one of the police reports. That was nothing that was Googled. That was nothing that was online. This is all before any of that existed. This was actually in the police report. And there was even some of the stuff that was scratched off because they thought it didn't make sense, but yet it still came out of his mouth. So I'm thinking there was something that was suppressing them to the point where what happened without any interruption. Amityville is definitely a very interesting case. It's a very interesting place. And unfortunately, I do believe that the Warrens try to capitalize on that in a negative way. Which is one of the things I personally don't like about it.
That was a phenomenal detail, man. The one thing that popped out at the end, though, that it just blows my mind is how hard was it to get a hold of those police reports? I mean, did you have to like submit some kind of request to get access to that, or were you kind of just given open book because of your status of investigating?
It actually wasn't too bad, only because they had somebody that they had Ronnie DeFeo in custody. Supposedly he did it. So it was kind of like an open and closed case. Now, if it was still an open case because they haven't found the person who did the crime, it would be a lot more difficult because it's still considered an open case. Now, was it as easy as me going in there and requesting anything? No, it wasn't. I did have to go through a few steps, and Doug actually helped me with that. He helped me with the forms and stuff like that. He reached out to a couple of people. So there was a few steps. It wasn't just easy peasy going in there and getting the stuff, but it was easier than it would have been if the case was still considered open.
Dean, I think we did an episode on Amityville a while ago, like when we first started the podcast, and we kind of came to the same conclusion that obviously we didn't investigate it. That, there was kind of something amiss here. We don't think, that it was difficult to decipher. Like, was it something demonic? And we kind of looked into the folks that moved in after the Lutzes, and
Yep.
it's like we didn't know how to read them. It kind of seemed like they were they bought the home at a very cheap price, and they were just trying to find it out. Like,
yeah, and it's funny because, believe it or not, I'm probably the one person that didn't look into the Lutzes. I was more concerned about the DeFeos and before. The DeFeos and pre-DeFeos. One person had mentioned a certain tribe burial ground, and it's like, no, that's not going to be it, because that particular tribe doesn't bury their loved ones near water. So that's already an out. They went as far as changing the address of the home from 108 Ocean Drive to 112 Ocean Drive. And even now, the infamous windows are gone. They're just square windows. But they're trying to kind of veer off the tourists and stuff like that. That's never going to happen, because people know the presence of that place, and some of the stuff went on. Even Ronnie DeFeo's mom was known to kind of dip into different spiritualities and even witchcraft, supposedly. I don't know if that's true. If it is, I can say that probably had a helping hand as far as them, kind of being out of it or not as responsive during the gunshots. But knowing that I had the toxicology report and it showed nothing in their system is a huge thing. Is really, really huge. And I think there's a lot more to it than we know. I would still consider it an open case if it was me, because I think Ronnie DeFeo, he went through a lot of abuse with his dad. And he used to be kind of a gopher for his dad and, his uncle and stuff like that, doing the car dealerships and, doing all that kind of stuff and laundering money and all this other crap, So he was really afraid of his dad, because they had a really bad relationship. But people say, well, he lost it and he just finally shot him. And it wasn't just that. It wasn't just that, because Ronnie DeFeo was definitely affected in a different way. Not because he killed them, but he was affected because how it came to him to kill them. And that's what I wanted to get out of him. And I never had that opportunity, because I wanted to find out that part of Ronnie DeFeo, And unfortunately, didn't get to that.
One thing I like, Charlie, is that you go in depth with your research. Some folks will just jump straight to everything's like paranormal, everything's demonic. It sounds like you're doing a bit of both. Let's do an investigation to see if I could pick up any activity. Is there any hauntings? Is there something demonic here? But at the same time, you're looking into the actual facts of what occurred in that case, in that particular instance. And I think that's really important. When people don't do that, I think it really opens the door for like embellishment of stories and just making up a bunch of bullshit.
Sure.
which we've seen on some television shows as
Yeah.
of late, unfortunately. It and personally for me, I like enjoy watching like haunting television shows where they bring people on and they talk about their stories and stuff like that. Like Netflix had one called True Haunting with Chris DeCesare
Yeah.
with
Yeah.
I think it was the Erie Hall haunting, and I'm like, oh my goodness, I couldn't imagine
Mhm.
dealing with that. And then you have other shows where it's like this, I touched this doll and now I'm blind in one eye. It's like, dude, come on, man. Like,
That's the thing. I think when people start kind of getting to a point where they're trying to recreate a paranormal situation, it's going to make things a lot worse. Because I've had people come to me about apps for their phone. And I said, don't look at apps for your phone is all novelty. It's all novelty because our cell phones, our telephones are wired to be a telephone. An EMF detector is wired with what's considered a wide chip to detect a break in the magnetic field versus, microwave interferences and things like that. Our phones don't do that. An EMF detector is actually wired to detect a break in the magnetic field and differences in the microwaves and ranges and things like that, which is why apps for your phone is all novelty. Okay, but people say, "Oh, but it's been accurate." Well, sure, you can turn off GPS on your phone all you want, but for an app, I don't care if it's Chase Bank, Bank of America, I don't care if it's Wells Fargo. All apps that are created with a GPS in them, so they're detected as to when they were downloaded and things like that, right? At what time, what system, what operating system, things like that. Yeah. What happens is if I get this app, I don't care if it's an EMF or doing a voice recording. You got to be careful with that. That's why if you're going to use a voice recorder to do EVPs, you got to have a separate little digital recorder because that's all it is. It's a recorder. There's no GPS in it because what happens with the apps, I go to a haunted, diminished, decrepit hospital that's been shut down for over 50 years. That GPS is going to navigate to that app and say, the correspondence is now at this location. So if I start talking, the algorithm is going to start throwing out words that are familiar with hospitals, rooms, gurneys, ambulance, patients, doctors, nurses, needles, medicine, right? And people will be like, oh my God, it's so accurate. No, it's not. It's not. So I can take that app and I can go down to Walmart and I could be in the back dumpster saying, okay, we're now doing an EVP here behind Walmart because some dude dressed up like a clown and hung himself. I can sit there and say, hey, are there any clowns here? Or like, is there anybody here dressed like a clown? It's going to sit there and say shopping, customers. And it's going to name off things that are equivalent to shopping or to that. Do you know what I'm saying? That's why you got to be careful with apps. Those are all novelty. Our phones are not wired to do what a real EMF detector is made to do. And so it's really important to look at that because that can cross-contaminate your evidence. That can cause a major issue to what you're giving to people as far as evidence and information that's needed. You want it to be as proper as possible. That's why if you're going to do an EVP, have a separate little digital voice recorder. That's it. That's all it's for. Made for conferences. You want to take notes. Boom, EVP. Cameras. You want to use a digital camera? Cool. Just have a separate camera. Nothing that has a GPS in it. That's what I try to let people know because I see people spend a lot of money on apps. I'm like, oh my God.
Yeah. Since we're on the topic of tools of the trade, we've talked to plenty of people over the years who have laid out their full selection of what they use. But do you have a personal favorite? Something that is like absolutely, for the most part, hit the nail on the head when you're doing investigations? Like maybe a personal favorite that you like, maybe that's the most fun, but maybe also one that is more accurate or the most accurate that you've messed with?
It's really hard to say only because each investigation is different. I don't have a ton of tools. To me, I have my EMF, I have my EVP, I have my dowsing rods, I have my infrared camera. Okay. And then of course I have a Polaroid because Polaroid is perfect in 1, 2, 3 shots. If I feel like something's in front of me or I just heard something, okay, get 1, 2, 3, 4 shots. That way I can compare all 4 of them instantaneously. But there's been some investigation where my dowsing rods were amazing. I would just rather use my dowsing rods. There's been a couple investigations where, my God, my EMF is just amazing. So
sometimes the non-technical tools are the best, right? Some of the
yeah,
analog. They work the best.
They do. As a matter of fact, a person's house that I did way back when, it was like, again, in the 90s, this woman kept on claiming that she kept on hearing voices in a certain room and she was scared and she felt scared. She can feel it. And I'm not going to lie. As soon as you walk in there, you can feel it was nothing terrible. It was nothing demonic, but there was something, there was an energy, and Doug was right there, and you can feel that there was something that wasn't supposed to be there and it was trapped. So what we did is, again, we shut off all the main power. And what we do is, before doing an EVP session, we would shut the door of the bedroom, and underneath the door, and of course, all the power shut off so no fans could kick on, the windows were closed. Underneath the crack of the door, we put some holy water. And on top of the holy water, we put cotton balls. So if there's something truly powerful and negative, it'll blow those cotton balls off the holy water. Because, cotton balls are very sensitive. Once you get them wet, they'll stick. Then, of course, the cotton balls being on top of the holy water, we were sitting there asking it several questions. Nothing happened. And then after about a half hour, there was a couple of them towards the middle that were moving outward. They were just kind of jolting outward a little bit. And then it kind of opened up, which let us know that based on the questions that we were asking and the way it was responding, it wasn't anything negative, but it was definitely an entity of her family that was trapped there because they were trying to communicate with it at one point and seeing if they can manifest it. So basically, we had to send that entity or that manifestation back to its comfort to where it belonged and done properly. So it's interesting, some of the things that you can do without having to spend an arm and a leg, but sometimes it does take having to spend an arm and a leg.
So Charlie, I want to pull back a little bit and kind of take you to the beginning of where it all started before you got into paranormal investigations and, linking with your mentor and, helping people out. What was your earliest paranormal experience you could remember, and how that might have gotten you into the paranormal?
So this is going to be a really bizarre story, and it happened because of a dream. I wasn't even in my teens yet. I was about 11 or 12 years old, and I was fascinated, absolutely fascinated with the Titanic. I knew nothing about it. Zero. I just knew it was this big old ship. I remember having this dream. I knew it was me, but it didn't look like me. And I remember standing in between two people, and these two people were just arguing, and I'll never forget that. And they were fighting and arguing and arguing, and just beautiful room. But they were bickering, and I couldn't understand, but they were just fighting. Anyways, that's what I remember from the dream. Time goes by and I don't even think about it. And I remember telling my mom about it as a kid. But then for my birthday, it was my 14th birthday, I received my first Titanic book. It was a huge book. I was like, oh my God, so I started going through it, and I was like, oh my God, I can actually see what this. So I'm looking at it, and I'm looking at the captain, and I'm looking at the passengers, and I get to one page, and that page was the room that was in my dream. And that's when I'm like, oh my God. And I'll never forget, as a kid, I was crying. And I told my mom, I told her that was the room in my dream. That was the room in my dream. That's when I started really getting into it. And I was like, man, these people are dead. These people that were in my dream had to have been dead. I couldn't understand why I knew who I was, even though I didn't look like me, but I knew it was me. And because of that, that's how I started looking into the deceased and whole procedures of embalming and this and that, and how a person dies, and rigor mortis, just everything. I just went completely all in. That's when I knew. And then I started, of course, I've had my own experiences, but that is what triggered me. That dream is what triggered me 100%.
Kind of sounds like a little bit of, I don't know, maybe past life memory or something that kind of shot up, because we covered some topics about past lives where people remember certain things they should have no memory of. And, that's how they get into that stuff. So if you don't mind sharing some of the experiences you did have with the paranormal.
One of the places that I went to was the Queen Mary in Long Beach, California. I had my stuff with me, but I wasn't ready to do an investigation. I was just showing up. I was just getting there. I still had several nights to be on there and enjoy myself. And I go to the room, and they started presenting the card to open the door. It was at the Windsor Suite, if I'm not mistaken, but it wasn't opening. So I went to the front desk and I said, hey, look, at my key's not working. She goes, okay, no worries. I'll get the maintenance to come. So they did. Maintenance went, got my door open. Cool. So when you go into the room, once you walk in the door, just to the right is the bathroom. Here was a little closet. Straight ahead to the right was a bedroom, a wall, and this side was the living room. So I'm on the bed. I had the portal open, and I was right there by the bed, just kind of smoking out the window, because I used to smoke back then. And the smoke was going out the window, and I'm just sitting there. And then finally lay down, and there was 2 lights mounted on the wall by the headboard. One of them went out, turned it off, turned it on, and came back on. So I'm sitting there. I turned the lights off, and I'm just kicking back, and I hear the door. Now, the door had one of those slide locks. When you try to open, it gets caught. And I thought it was maintenance. I said, "Oh, hey, I'm good. I'm here. I was able to get in. Thank you. My key is working." And it still persisted, and the door opened. And I stood up, and I see this shadow go from the front door past where I was into the living room. And I was like, "Are you fucking kidding me? I'm not even set up. I'm not like, can I?" So I get up, and I'm like I couldn't grab everything. I'm sitting there, and I'm looking, and it comes right in front of me. And I'll never forget the feel and the smell. It was just like this very, very musty, cold sensation, just very musty smell right in front of me and right back out the door. Door didn't shut, nothing like that. It's just right out there. So here I am getting dressed, halfway falling over and, making a mess out of everything. I'm trying to hurry up and trying to get out the door. And I'm like trying to walk around. And I went up to the front desk, because literally if you walk out to where I was, you go down a little bit, and then to the right, that's where the front desk was. And I said, "Hey, did somebody come out here? Did somebody come out?" She said, No, but I didn't see anybody. "Oh my God." And I said, "I can't believe it." And I'm like losing my shit, right? Sorry for the word, but she goes, "Okay, yeah, you're in the Windsor suite." She goes, "Yeah, that's normal."
Okay. Oh, yeah.
What did you tell me?
Oh man.
And she's like, "Yeah, that happens a lot." And then she was talking about one of the main quarters down at the bottom, like in B or something. But yeah, that was I was like so excited and so bummed at the same time.
Yeah, too general.
Because I didn't have anything set up. I wasn't ready to do anything. I just had gotten there a little bit ago. I finally got into my room. I just finished a cigarette. I'm like, okay. And now I got whoever coming into my room. You know what I'm saying?
Anytime we hear people talk about smells when it comes to paranormal things, that always takes my notch to the nth degree in terms of like craziness for these situations. Because when you start smelling things, we've talked to people who smelled smoke, and that's been like a consistent thing too, like people smelling tobacco smoke or whatever it is.
Yeah.
But when you add that in there, that's to me is really unique, because it's typically most experiences I think are visual or auditory. I don't really think that smells play into it as much as those first two. Have you had other experiences in your investigations with smells? Like, what were they? What is your general take on why that happened?
I'm with you when it comes to the odors versus visuals. I think visuals is a very powerful form of evidence for sure. When we're present and we're trying to do an investigation and have an understanding, I had investigated, even not like at the Boulder Dam Hotel in Boulder City, Nevada. Now, one of the rooms that I went in, the smell of perfume was so profound. And when after the investigation, after doing my research and stuff like that, and I saw I know who the person was that was in that room at the time. I can't remember her name offhand. Going into the history of that individual and, how she passed away and being in that room, so on and so forth, especially being related to some of the workers of Hoover Dam, that was the perfume she would wear. So that smell helped me confirm the identity of that manifestation, saying, yes, it was this person because that's what they would wear. Or if somebody says, "Oh yeah, I can smell this tobacco smoke, or I can smell this pipe, or I can smell this cigar." Of course, back in the day, a lot of people, it was huge for them to smoke cigars and pipes and stuff, but it was more of a private thing. It was more of a private luxury thing. And so it wasn't as consistent, but if you're smelling that, that's giving you, again, a solid confirmation that the person you're trying to understand is that individual who smoked that, or who wore this perfume, or maybe they've been passed on for so long to the point where, hey, this person has been manifested for so long, you can smell that musty smell. There's something not right. That's when you have to separate it and say, okay, who am I investigating here? Why am I investigating? What's going on? How many times has this happened before? Who has it happened to, and who passed on, and what happened in that particular spot at that certain times? You know what I'm saying? So I think odors are a really, really good way to find out confirmation of manifestation for sure.
So for me, my experiences growing up were less paranormal. a little bit spiritual. There's some things that we could talk about another time, but for me, I would say the things that stood out the most growing up that piqued my interest in this sort of thing were UFO encounters,
Oh,
or not being abducted or anything, but alien related stuff, seeing stuff in the sky that was unexplainable. For instance, I'll just give you a quick one. I've talked about
Lizard
this many
people.
times. Lizard people. I'll say that one really, really quickly because we just did an episode that'll probably come out. I don't want to bore people with repeating it, but I basically had a sleep paralysis experience when I was maybe 13 or so, and I woke up in my room to a like 5'10" to 6'2" foot lizard looking creature wearing really weird clothes in the corner of my room. I was oddly calm when I saw it, and the thing was just peering back at me, and I was just laying there for a good like minute or so before I went back to sleep. And then I did the whole wake up in the morning like whoa, what was that? Whoa. So that stuck with me for years. But seeing things in the night sky about around where I grew up, I saw many, many times lights traveling across the sky in the distance over the horizon, and they would spit out smaller lights and they would kind of disperse from the larger light. But the strange thing is, it acted like a helicopter, but I know of no military aircraft that would have those lights return. And we're talking about a time long ago when there weren't any drones or anything like that around that time period. So I would watch these smaller lights come out of the bigger light, and then they would go off on their own, and they would hover a ways away from the bigger light. Then they would return up into the larger light. And man, I can't tell you how many times I've researched like what that could possibly be, but I always had to lean more towards UFOs because I couldn't find anything. But have you ever had any experiences with UFOs? Is that something that also piques your interest?
Oh, big time. UFOs, Bigfoot, all that kind of stuff. It could seem kind of shady, but I tell people, look, have I seen Bigfoot personally? I can't say that I have, but there's a lot more evidence out there showing that it does exist versus that it doesn't. But being a filmmaker and watching some of the footage of Bigfoot, for instance, I'll just say, and film back in the day was very expensive, especially to process. So if you ever watch like super old film from somebody's personal camera, it looks very scratchy and grainy. That's because it's very inexpensive film. Very expensive film would have not that much in it. Anyways, long story short, there are certain pieces on the side of film that existed back in a certain date, and they didn't make it after that. So that's a whole different story, but that's what got me to believe that. As far as UFOs, I have experienced seeing certain lights and things. I'm like, there is no way that is a plane or a helicopter. I don't care what anybody, there's no way.
Especially in Nevada, right? That'd be so awesome to be out there and see something there, dude. Yeah.
There's just no way. One of them, I was taking out the garbage one night, and I had seen, it was just a blue light. It was just a blue light, and it just caught my attention. I was just sitting there looking at it, throwing out the trash. And as I was walking back, I'm seeing it, it kind of disappeared. I'm like, oh, I didn't think anything. And then I saw it appear, and I'm like, what? No way did I just see that? And it really caught me off guard. But that wasn't the only. I've seen it. I've experienced a couple of times where I've seen lights like that. Other times where there was like several lights, and then they were like dimming, and then they're just pretty interesting. So I definitely do believe in that for sure. I just find it hard to believe that we're the only living things.
100%. Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
All right, Charlie, the last question I got for you today, I got to ask you, man, you were on Montel Williams Show to talk about the paranormal. Sylvia Browne was there. You mind sharing what that was like, and if you had any interactions with Sylvia off camera discussing the paranormal?
Yeah, I definitely had interactions with her for sure, off camera. We were in the back as there was a couple of other people on stage talking, but it was myself. Leanne, her name is Leanne Wilmer, and I knew her quite well. There was a young lady who was going to talk about her paranormal experience of soldiers going through her house type of thing. And then Sylvia Browne, that ignorant ass. So, I was talking to the young lady that was talking about the soldiers in her house, and I was like, wow, that's incredible. How often did that happen? And then I can hear Sylvia Browne talking to her as well. She was like leaning over. She goes, yeah, but those are things that I would just say, because how many times I've made up stories just so I can get my point across. I'm like, how many times I want to tell you to go screw yourself? Like, no. Nope. And then even when I ended up, when it was our turn to go up on stage, well, I was in the panel. I was on the floor. But John, who was up there talking, he was a good friend of mine. He actually owned Carluccio's, where I did the investigation. But like when they asked me the question, I started answering. Like Sylvia Browne was constantly trying to talk over me. I'm like, no, that's not going to happen. I'm not going to let you input your crap, your baloney, your bullshit over me, because she made it very evident that she's okay with just saying whatever, just to give people what they want to hear instead of what they need to understand. There's a big difference. You know what I mean? And that's, yeah. Then I started hearing other stories about from back when she said, oh yeah, your son is definitely dead and they found him alive and all this other stuff. Nah. I personally don't like her. I never believed in her. After hearing that, that's setting up for me. That was just like some of the paranormal TV shows that we know about. That's it. Once I come into that, I'm done. I lose respect. I don't have time for that, because for me, I take it very, very serious, because you're messing with a location. You're talking about somebody's loved one. You're trying to help somebody, a location, a deceased. You can't be doing that. You can't be doing that kind of stuff, you know? So that is definitely my thought on her.
That's fair, and I'm with you. I think it was on Reddit or something. Somebody made like a whole laundry list of everything that she got wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And you know what they say, like, what is it? The saying, a broken clock is right twice a day. But there's some psychics and stuff like from the past, like that have been scary accurate, I would say.
Sure.
Like when you come to like, you ever heard of like Baba Yaga, like the famous like?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
100%.
Some people could do it, some people can't. But
there's reality, like him.
Yeah.
Then there's reality, like Sylvia. That's her reality, not reality. You know what I'm saying? So
Yeah.
there's a big difference. But yeah, no, absolutely. There are some people that are just super scary accurate and like, wow, okay, cool. I think I'm just gonna go take a shower now.
Yeah. So last follow-up question. In your investigations, have you included psychics, and what are your thoughts on them being involved in those investigations?
Look, there was only one time, and that lasted about 10 minutes. And it's not me being mean. It's just that they went off on a complete different tangent. And that could be a problem with evidence, because you can contaminate evidence by improper information without even knowing what's going on. So would I go even like now, would I do an investigation with a psychic? No, I would never do it again. Somebody who does mediumship, 100%. I would. And not just anybody. It would have to be somebody that I would get to know, that I would talk about. My girlfriend does mediumship. She scares me sometimes with some of the crap she says. I'm like, wait a minute. What did you just say? Can we like not do that today? Because that is too much. That's just like, that's a lot right now. Holy crap. Like it freaked me out. I knew of another person that did mediumship, and he was like, holy moly. Like this guy was just incredible. So when it comes to mediumship, yes. When it comes to like psychics and stuff, no. There's a big difference too. But yeah, that's and it's not me downing anybody. It's just I'm trying to look out for the deceased. I'm trying to look out for where I'm at. You know what I'm saying?
Dean, before we wrap up, did you have anything additional for Charlie?
No, I think I'm going to save it for next round, but this has been fantastic.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate you guys having me on. I really do.
Yeah, thank you so much for agreeing to come on. I came across you on TikTok. You were doing like an investigation where I think you were like house sitting for a friend or something, and you were going through the evidence. And I looked through all those, and then I saw like the pinned video of you on Montel. I'm like, I got to talk to this guy. And so glad that you.
And also, whenever you do get that investigation digitized from that crazy experience, please let us know. I know it's probably really hard to do, but if and when you do it, please let us know, because I am really just looking forward to seeing that or anything else you put out there. So thanks for sharing that.
No, for sure. I'll be sure to share that with you guys. I know I have some footage of a presence walking across the cemetery when I was just trying to get B-roll footage. I wasn't there for any other reason. But I'll have to share that with you guys for sure.
I always tell Dean I'm into this stuff, but I'm a huge chicken. Like I wouldn't investigate. Or
got his holy water and his cross. He's going to throw me to the fire if we ever do this. So I'm going to be his first line of shield defense for him.
No worries. No. I look forward to it. I can't thank you guys enough for having me on. So thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. And before we end, Charlie, why don't you tell the listeners and viewers where they could reach you and get a hold of you?
Yeah, well, again, if they want to go to Charlie Ghost Hunter on TikTok, they can go there and just see what I'm posting. Again, that's a new account because my other one got got banned for whatever reason. I'm not sure why. So I hate having to start over. But then I have 2 YouTube channels. One of them, which is kind of under Haunted and Alone, where I have all my stuff. But I also have one called Ghost Vacancy, because I'm also shooting basically like mini episodes. It's going to be like a mini version of Twilight Zone. So I'm creating a channel for that. But yeah, they can find me on TikTok at Charlie Ghost Hunter. And then I have my link on there for my YouTube channel. And I just try to keep posting as much as I can and start sharing my experiences more often.
Go ahead, give him a follow, check out his YouTube channels, and check out his haunted content. Once again, Charlie, thank you so much for agreeing to be on the show. Can't wait to have you back on to talk more paranormal investigations and creepy stuff in general. Folks, I hope you enjoyed today's episode, and thank you for tuning in.
You've reached the end of tonight's journey on the Wandering Road. The show is written and produced by me, Chris, and my co-host, Dean. If you've got a scary story of your own, or if you'd like to join us as a guest, send your tale to twroadpodcast@gmail.com. We'd love to hear from you. Don't forget to follow us on social media for more haunted fun. And if you enjoyed tonight's episode, please rate, review, and share the show. It helps keep the lantern burning for fellow travelers. Until next time, keep your eyes on the road and your mind in the shadows, because the wandering never ends.